Okay.
Hey, Laura.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm excited for this.
Well, thank you so much for joining.
All right. So today we're gonna go through a abbreviated version of our pitch deck. All of the details are on our Equivesto profile page. So we invite you to check that out, and any of the items that we've covered today, there's almost certainly more detail in that profile for your reading and information. Today we'll kind of fly through a number of points here. What and who is BigCom? Abby will go through what is permaculture, which is one of the main things inspiring BigCom. What is the offering? So some of the investment details. And then kind of to the heart of it, what is Equivesto? Who can invest and how to invest? And for that, we have Alexander Morsink from Equivesto, Managing Director. He's been working with us over the last number of months to get the campaign going, and has a wonderful platform. He and his team are actually raising on it themselves right now, and are really doing some interesting and exciting things for making private equity offerings like ours available to everyday investors. So not just the closed rooms, but accessible to a lot more people. And then we'll open the floor for Q&As. All right, so what is BigCom? I know some of you already know this. We've spoken at length about this, but kind of as a brief overview, BigCom is a place that Abby and I discovered 2-3 years ago, a beautiful acreage in the Slocan Valley in the Kootenays in British Columbia. It's about 30 plus acres on a nice bench away from the highway, but with nice north and south valley views. Backs onto Crown land on a mountain slope, and not too far is the river and the lake at the village of Slocan. And it's just a beautiful property, and the name really came from the feeling that you feel when you're here. It's nice and peaceful and quiet, and just a wonderful big calm. One of the challenges with the property was that it came with an old homesteader cabin, a 1969 build, a beautiful log cabin that unfortunately was just built on bare earth, and so the foundation is really kind of given out, and made it really difficult to insure. And ironically, for tiny houses, there does need to be a building with foundation, and ideally it's a primary dwelling. And so what led us down the path of looking at a BigCom as a potential tiny homestead community is looking at commercial insurance options, and also looking at the kind of pent-up demand for spacious tiny house rental pads, that there wasn't a lot of it in a lot of areas across Canada because the zoning restrictions were quite restrictive. And that led us kind of down the path of exploring this idea of a tiny homesteads community. Fairly modest, about 10 or 11 pads, 8 of which would be long-term renters, and 2 or 3 which would be guest stay rentals. And we already have one of those on site called the Pocket Getaway, which is a 25-foot jaunt tiny house model. And yeah, we've basically been exploring this. We put out the idea to see if there was interest, and lo and behold, we had a number of people raise their hand or ask questions about how they could move to the valley and live in a place like BigCom. Who is BigCom? Well, that's Abby and I. We're introducing ourselves to our parents and to our friends. But I work in software on the business side. I work with some great startups and in mental health software and startups. And Abby's in communications, and got into permaculture.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about permaculture and the 3 kinds of capital that we're building at BigCom. Permaculture, it really inspired the creation of BigCom, and it will be our guide going forward. It's more than just gardening or composting. It's a way that It's a way that everyone can do what they can to take care of the land and of the earth, so it takes care of us. And when I learned about permaculture, I found that to be incredibly empowering. And by practicing permaculture at BigCom, we are building natural capital. Permaculture also represents a shared goal around which we're building a community and therefore social capital. As of today, we've had 46 responses to our Tiny Homesteader questionnaire. We've met dozens of incredible people. There are a few on this call right now with diverse backgrounds and skill sets and so many ideas. It's been absolutely inspiring. And we know that a community composed of these kinds of people will be stronger than the sum of its parts. And in this way, we're building human capital. As for financial capital, I'll turn that to Steve.
Yeah, one of the founders of, or the thought leaders, I guess, in permaculture, one of his quotes here is, though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And that's where this chart, which is kind of the problem slide of our pitch, it looks at the big macro issues that are facing us today. Those, of course, are climate change, the pandemic, which we all know and love at this point, and mental health and the fatigue from the pandemic or the anxiety around climate change, that those are big sort of omnipresent macro forces that are changing people's behaviors, really forcing people to reconsider how they live, where they live, how they work, what they do, where they do that work from. And that's leading to some really exciting market trends. The four that we're really focused on are, of course, tiny homes. There's a huge interest in professional built designer tiny homes. There's some of the best builders, the most innovative designs and floor plans are really going into this space. And they have a very small eco footprint as well. And there's a lot of innovation in that regard within the tiny space. And it's an incredibly quickly growing market. Big players like IKEA are in this. And like I said, some of the most popular YouTube channels are also very, very well subscribed. Then there's also the movement towards remote work. The pandemic forced this on a lot of people. It changed how people perceive office work, and many are able to do their work better or more enjoyably, or more in balance when they can do it more remotely. And so as long as you've got a good internet connection, and you could work from anywhere, so why not work from the country and have a beautiful view like we're looking at right now of the trees and the deer and the wild turkeys. Of course, rural was something that also showed up during the pandemic, getting out of the city, getting a little bit more green space, some fresh air, some fresh water. That's something that a lot of people are looking at in that work-life balance, and getting their hands dirty. Gardening was one of the top trends during the pandemic, and it still is. It's still a growth area, and it's a healthy thing. And then regenerative, which is a larger movement around some of the permaculture principles that Abby mentioned as well. And that's more of a balance with nature and working at the community level here to observe the land and work within it, build a nice community of people who like to engage with the land and with each other. So the investment piece of this kind of fits with all of those as well. It's something where we're looking at this holistically. We're trying to find ways that our long-term renters can participate in the venture itself. And so that's what led us to crowd equity or equity crowdfunding, to a platform like Equivesto, and to offering long-term dividend generating shares. And so the Coles notes of that raise, of the raise that's underway right now, is that we're offering preferred shares that's basically producing long-term dividends that increase by a percentage point each year of the 10 years that it's producing those dividends, so from 6% to 15% in the last year. We're doing that on a platform called Equivesto, which facilitates these. They're a licensed exempt market dealer, technically a financial institution. And Alexander, who's on the call, he'll be elaborating on that and what that means a little bit later here. And it's for eligible investors, so those who currently reside in the Canadian provinces of BC, Alberta, Ontario, Nova Scotia. We do have options for others that are in other provinces or that are in the US. We're focused tonight mostly on the Equivesto piece here. Like I said, that's basically a revenue share on the operations of BigCom Inc. That's primarily through long-term renters, as well as the guest stay revenues from those 2 or 3 Airbnbs or short-term rentals, as well as over the longer term, some other incremental revenue opportunities, such as event hosting or possibly some publishing online. The dividend schedule, it looks like this. So in year 1, that's the build out year. That's hopefully the work that we'll be continuing to perform this year in building out the community. Year 2 is getting everything up and running with kind of a full slate of renters on their pads. And then the dividend kicks in, like I said, moving from 6% up to 15% over the following 10 years. So a nice steady increasing share. The shares are cumulative, so it's a fixed rate. So the rate is fixed. That doesn't change, and it's cumulative. So if there is a slow year for one reason or another, that carries over to the next, so that by the end of it, you'll have received that full amount. The average rate over that course is 10.5%. That's 40 dividend payments, so 10 years, 4 quarters each. And the equity multiple for the whole thing is to double or 2x equity multiple at a 7.6% IRR for those keeping track. We've also wanted to involve some local or regional providers. So we put together a pretty awesome perks package as well. Things that by investing, you'll also receive, and those, depending on the tier of investment, include a stay at the Pocket Getaway, some swag. We're starting up this really fun art project called BigCom Biota, which is basically an art project with an artist called, his name's John Bowie. He does these amazing graphite sketches, and we're hoping to sketch out a lot of the wildlife and the plants and animals basically that are in the area here. We've partnered with Raven Reads, which produces a quarterly gift box of Indigenous literature and art. Really high quality stuff delivered to your mailbox each quarter. And there's a chocolatier, Viva Cacao, that makes some wonderful chocolate. There's also other perks here as far as tree planting or a dedication on a fence post, a discount to Verge Permaculture, to their permaculture design course, and an invitation to our community. It's also a way for those who are interested in renting here to reserve the pad of their choice. The funds will go towards building out BigCom and hopefully doing it in one shot. Our conservative business plan is to do it in phases, but just given how busy the trades and contractors have been over the last couple of years, we'd like to do this in one shot. And largely at this point, it is groundworks for the pads themselves. It's the expansion of the septic system, which is already in place. At least partial zones are in place at this point, as well as other things like installation of a well and a tractor for snow plowing. We've been busy over the last year and a half. A lot of groundworks. We've been pulling out services. So there are 2 water sources that we've pulled lines to, the power connection to the power grid with Fortis. The beast of the project has been the Type 2 septic system, which is a super clean, large community scale, but small footprint septic field and septic system. And then the Shangri-Loft, which we're in right now, which is a nice shared space with laundry facilities and a place to store bikes and skis and other items like that. So that's a quick run through of what BigCom is, who we are, and what the offering is for the investment. And we're lucky to have Alex, the managing director from Equivesto, here today to answer some of our questions. We've collected a few that will bounce over to you, Alex. But maybe first we can start with just an introduction of Equivesto and you and what you do with them.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you very much, Steve and Abby. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you, everyone. So as the nice slide describes, I am a managing director and a co-founder of Equivesto. As Steve mentioned, Equivesto is a fully licensed exempt market dealer. And essentially in normal English, an exempt market dealer is a financial institution that is licensed to deal in and sell investments in the exempt market. And the exempt market really just means private companies. So you have the public market. So that would be investments on the stock exchange or mutual funds or things like that, that you would go and you'd speak to a financial advisor, maybe at, TD Bank or RBC, for buying and selling private companies. You would go to an exempt market dealer. So we're fully licensed in the 4 provinces that the investment is open. So Ontario, Alberta, BC, and Nova Scotia. And essentially our responsibility and the responsibility of all exempt market dealers in Canada is to sort of protect investors and companies in the private investing space. So as a company going out to raise capital, if you want to be able to go out to a broader audience and raise capital from a number of different people, you do need to work with an exempt market dealer. It's kind of mandated by the government. And the reason being, our license is to not only prepare and do due diligence on any company that's looking to raise capital from a broader group of investors, but also to help work with those investors themselves directly. So to help review their current financial situation, review their personal financial details, and help determine if they are suitable and their risk tolerance lines up with an investment in a private company. So really the government wants to make sure that there is someone there in the middle that's not necessarily associated with the company directly, who can help kind of give that feedback to an investor and make sure that, anything that the company is saying to investors has been verified and is true and all that sort of stuff. And the investor knows that there's someone that they can talk to about the investment as well. So that's really our role in the whole space. We've been directly working with the government to help enable equity crowdfunding and crowd investing into businesses on a much broader scale. We're actually directly involved in the creation of new rules for all of Canada, which came into effect in September of 2021. We were quite proud to be able to participate, even in a small way, in that process to help create what we consider to be a more fair, open, and equitable private investing space. In terms of our mission as a business, it's really about creating more opportunities for all Canadians, as opposed to only very high net worth investors being able to access private equity opportunities and investing through things like venture capital firms. We want to be able to allow Canadians to invest directly into businesses that they care about, even if those businesses are small businesses. It doesn't make sense to me that you can go on the stock market and invest in Walmart, but you can't go and invest in the small local grocery store, even though you'd rather shop there as well. That felt like a huge disconnect. And so we created this business to really sort of facilitate things like that. And so we're very excited to have BigCom come and raise on the platform, because your mission to sort of improve community access and really work on mental health and connect with nature, we feel kind of aligns with our general mission of improving sort of education and awareness and helping access for people with their investments. So that's kind of a very long-winded answer of what is Equivesto. I can talk more about sort of our process and things like that, but I'm sure you have some questions, Steve, that I'd be happy to tackle as well.
Yeah, well, we'll start with a few of the ones that we've heard from folks, and there will be folks watching the recording afterwards. So hopefully this addresses some of their questions. Let's start with kind of the basic one, Alex. Who is eligible to invest?
Yeah, so the whole idea about investing is trying to, especially through a platform like Equivesto, is try to make it as open as possible for people. However, we are still governed by the laws around raising capital for businesses in Canada. So Equivesto is licensed in 4 provinces. Alberta, BC, Ontario, and Nova Scotia. And as a result, we can only help and allow investors to invest from those 4 provinces. So if you're living in those provinces and you're interested in investing, congratulations, you're eligible to invest. If you still want to support, but you're not in those 4 provinces, then you would need to speak to Steve directly, and there might be some other methods to allow you to support the business, but we wouldn't be able to assist you with a direct investment.
And kind of related is this would have come from the new crowdfunding rules last September, I believe. But what are the investor categories that people would fall into?
Yeah, so the Canadian government has outlined some firm limits around the amounts that people can invest into private businesses. Not to sort of get overly complex from the legal side, but essentially the new set of rules that we've been talking about that BigCom is using to raise capital is really about accepting investment from the general public. There are some existing rules that have existed for a long time that allow high net worth investors to participate. And so what we're actually doing is we're using both sets of rules at the same time. So if somebody is a high net worth investor, then they're able to participate in larger investment amounts kind of in a more traditional way, but still using the platform. And sort of everyday Canadians, regular people like you and I, can all participate through this new set of rules, but the government does have some limits there. So essentially, if you sign up on the Equivesto platform and you fill out the information and you don't want to provide any additional documents, and you just sort of say, hey, here's my income, here's my assets, then you'll be sort of automatically approved to invest up to $5,000 into the business. And we call this category of investor a retail investor. So sort of everybody can invest up to $5,000 there. The next step up with slightly higher limits is called the eligible investor. I know eligible is a little bit strange, but the government uses this label, so we've kind of copied it. So you have the retail investor up to $5,000. The next step up is called eligible investor. So this is an investor who would make and have total income from the previous year of $75,000 or more, or would be an individual with $400,000 in net financial assets or more. And by net financial assets, what I mean is assets in things like cash, savings accounts, or financial products like investments, pension funds, RRSPs, things like that. This would not include any amounts in real estate investments. And why is that, you ask? Well, the Canadian government wants to make sure that if you're making an investment into something, that you still have more than enough funds elsewhere, that if you needed the money in the short term, you ended up losing your job for whatever reason, or you had a large medical bill, you had enough money somewhere else that you could sort of exit and take the money out of that investment or take it out of somewhere else to be able to put towards maintaining your quality of life. And so the Canadian government feels like real estate is not liquid enough. You can't sell it fast enough to be able to sort of fulfill that role, even though in many provinces the real estate market is very hot, and so you could probably sell a house in 5 minutes. The rules haven't changed with the real estate market. So again, 400,000 in net financial assets and 75,000 in total income from the previous year. Either of those would qualify you as an eligible investor. And an eligible investor is allowed to invest up to $10,000 in business opportunities through that set of rules. And the Canadian government is quite firm, and they fix the amount at that 10,000. So really the most that a kind of regular person can invest in something like this is $10,000 per person. I tried very hard to get it higher, literally arguing with the government about it, but they moved it to 10,000 from 2,500. So that's the best we could do at the time, but we're still working on it. The next category is when we're getting into the high net worth investor. So this is the accredited investor category. These individuals do not have fixed limits. So if somebody wanted to give you $1 billion, Steve, technically they could using this set of rules. And an accredited investor would be somebody with 200,000 in total income from the previous year, or over $1 million in net financial assets. You could also qualify as an accredited investor if you and your spouse together made over $300,000 in the previous year, or if you had over 5 million in total net worth. So now you can include real estate in that $5 million calculation. But essentially, the limit set quite firm by the government is general public up to $5,000 per investment. If you have 75,000 in income or 400,000 in net financial assets, you can do up to 10,000. And then high net worth accredited investors with either 200,000 in income or $1 million can do as much as they like.
Thank you. And what is with Equivesto specifically? So it's an online portal. What is maybe walk us through what the process is, both to signing up for an account and then also for selecting an offering like BigCom or others that are on the platform?
Certainly. So also, I'll just say at the beginning, a lot of this information and much more information on Equivesto and how we operate is all available on our website at equivesto.com/learn. So there's tons of details there about the companies, the process, the type of questions we ask, how to actually fill out the forms, how to get back to the forms if you stop filling them out, how to actually make a transaction. All of that information is all there. So you can have a look at equivesto.com/learn as well, or you can email us directly, or tell Steve to contact me and I'll call you. There's a million ways to get in touch, but we'll walk through it together now as well. So part of our responsibility as the licensed financial institution, and part of why we've built all this technology, is we need to be able to do a number of things as required by the Canadian government to allow people in to invest. So the Canadian government wants to make sure that there's no illegal activity, there's no fraud or criminal things going on. And so part of our responsibility as the platform is to verify the identity of every investor, and then to protect that same investor, to go through with the investor and get to understand a little bit more their personal financial situation. This is called KYC, or Know Your Client. And essentially, our job is to make sure that we can sort of understand your personal situation and make sure that we can give you some advice so that you're not putting your entire life savings into one investment, which would be unadvisable. So that's kind of our requirements in order to enable someone to invest. So how does the process work? You simply head to Equivesto, and there'll be the buttons all over the place that say sign up. Essentially, you'd click sign up, and we would ask you a couple of questions on an application form. We would ask your name, your address, your date of birth. We would ask about your income. We would ask about your marital status. We would ask about your employment situation. And we would ask about your experience investing before and your risk tolerance. All of these things come together to help us determine the financial situation and what investment limits should be recommended for you personally based on those constraints already outlined by the Canadian government. So we ask all those questions online in the application form. It takes about maybe 2 to 3 minutes to complete the whole form, and then you submit it to us. We review that information, and then we can actually approve your account. If you're applying as either an eligible or an accredited investor, where you need to have those additional sort of income or the assets, we will actually need to collect documents from you that show those amounts. Again, this is required by the government. We have to verify those pieces in order to protect both you and to protect BigCom and the private investing space. And these are all the same kind of questions that you'd be asked actually opening a new bank account or opening investment account at something like TD, RBC, or a newer platform like Wealthsimple or Questrade. We're all governed actually by the same sort of set of rules around client protection. And this KYC process, Know Your Client, that I mentioned, is the same process that all financial institutions in Canada would need to follow. So it's basically like you're opening a new bank account, but the account is not with TD, the account is with Equivesto. Once you submit that information through our secure website, then we can review and provide your investment limits. If you have any questions, of course, you can reach out to us during that time. And we try to do that very quickly so that you don't have to wait. but it can take up to 1 business day, depending on, if you submitted at 3 in the morning and members of my team happen to be asleep. Once your account is approved, the investment process as well is quite simple. Equivesto is designed to give access to the general public to investment opportunities like this. It's not about creating barriers or trying to limit people. And so the easiest and most effective way that we can do that is by making the process online. So when you want to invest, you can head to the BigCom campaign page, and there'll be a ready to invest button right on the top of the page, sort of on the right-hand side, about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way up. Once you click that button, it'll take you to a screen where you can actually select the amount that you'd like to invest, and then it'll ask you to confirm your acknowledgement of some statements. All investments in private companies, according to the Canadian government, would be considered to be high risk, and that's because of some core differences between investing in a public company on a stock market. Investing in a company on the stock market means you'll be able to sell your investment the next day or the next minute if you'd like to another investor. Private companies, in their nature, are private and are not currently being traded. So if you invest in something like BigCom, once the investment is all done and settled, there will be a number of years before you're actually able to sell your investment. So that is a difference. Another would be the amount of information available. So companies listed on the stock market are legally required to provide audited financial statements and quarterly updates to investors. Those same legal requirements do not apply to BigCom, though Steve will be sending out updates to investors quite frequently. They're not legally mandated. So because of this, the Canadian government automatically claims that all investments in private businesses are considered high risk, even though something like BigCom, has done a lot of work to sort of prepare and outline the investment and ensure that all of the investors' money will be treated very carefully. So you have to confirm some declarations when you're beginning your investment process. After that, you check the little boxes. The system will automatically prepare the documents for you to sign. The document is generated and filled with much of your information to keep things nice and simple for you. And as short as we try to make the document, investment documents are quite long. So we apologize for that, but it is as short as we can make it. The system will have these nice little red arrows throughout the document signing process to direct you right to the sections that you actually need to complete. Any section that doesn't have a red arrow, you can just ignore that. And so the red arrow will point to somewhere that says sign here. You click on the box and it'll bring up a window for you to either draw your signature with the mouse, which for me always turns out to look like a childlike scribble. So there's another option, which is to type your signature. So I always choose to do that. To me, that looks a little bit better, but maybe you're much better at drawing with the mouse than I am. Once the documents are signed, there will be a red arrow further down in the document, which will sort of direct you to the next section. So you can kind of jump your way through the document if you'd like to move faster, or you can scroll and read all, I think it's like 47 pages or something if you like. And it will direct you to the next section if you follow the red arrow. You can complete all the information as you go, and then the document will be officially submitted. The last step of the investment is actually sending the funds. So there'll be a screen requesting your Canadian bank account information. We do not keep this information on file, and it's there simply to provide direction to your bank to send exactly the amount for your investment to our segregated account. So you provide your account number, you provide your transit number and your institution number there, and you click continue to actually submit your investment. So even though I've been talking and sort of describing the process, the actual investment process would probably take less time than I've spent describing it just now. But we're also available and happy to walk anyone through the process if there's any questions. As a financial services company, we are quite heavily regulated by the Canadian government, and all of our technology, the security around it and everything has been very thoroughly vetted. We have to pass all these checks and everything in order to be able to operate something like this. The securities regulator and Canadian government take this very seriously. It took us 3.5 years and over $1 million to get Equivesto licensed and set up to be able to even take our first client. And we have worked very hard to make sure that all of these things are done in a very safe and secure manner for all investors.
Super. Yeah. By the way, how many clients have you raised for at this point?
So we've launched a number of additional campaigns. At this point, it's almost 30 campaigns that we've run on the platform, and we've raised almost $4 million for companies over the past really just 2 years. We launched right at the end of 2020, getting our license in the middle of the pandemic, which was fun. And then, yeah, we've run, as I mentioned, almost 30 offerings, raising at this point $4 million from almost 3,500 investors.
Excellent. So our raise is we've set the kind of maximum number of maximum amount of shares, dollar amount of shares at 250,000, which is one of the caps for the crowdfunding exemption.
Yes.
And importantly, we've also set a minimum on this campaign, which is 80,000. So 80,000 will let us do a partial amount of the build out at a reasonable sort of kind of a reasonable phased approach. What happens if that goal isn't met within the campaign window, which actually is one of the other questions here. When is the offering open? So we opened it about a week and a half or so ago, and it's a 90-day window overall. And so I think it's July 12th is the July 11th or 12th is the end date that this offering is available to those who would like to invest in it. Alex, what happens if the minimum of the campaign goal is not reached?
Yeah, so if the minimum isn't reached, any funds raised up to that point are automatically refunded to the investors. Essentially, the government wants to make sure that companies raise enough money from the crowd to go and achieve, some of their stated objectives. So every campaign has to set a minimum raise amount. And so if that amount isn't reached, the funds are refunded back to the investors. Of course, if it has been reached and you sort of raise beyond that, then of course the raise has been successful and the funds will proceed on to BigCom.
Excellent. Thank you. A couple other questions that have come up that aren't really Equivesto related, but we'll address them here. One is, what is the Homesteader Tier? So you'll notice on the offering page that we've kind of packaged different amounts. You're free to invest any amount above 2,500, but we've got different tiers, and associated with those are different perks with those tiers. And one of those 5 tiers is called the Homesteader Tier, which you want to quickly overview?
So the Homesteader Tier is basically a way for individuals to reserve their pad at BigCom, but also get an equity stake and be entitled to receive those dividends, which could help offset the future rent. It also allows the renters to participate in the success of the community. And of course, the Homesteader Tier comes with all the same perks as the other tiers, but that specific tier, the Homesteader Tier, is what enables individuals to reserve their pad.
Yeah, and there is a vetting process that we have for renters as well. So there is, if you go to bigcom.ca/reserve, it outlines that process, and this particular raise, the equity point, if that's of interest to folks, is one of those steps. Can I support but not invest? So for those that aren't in any of the eligible provinces, or not in Canada, or just not interested in an equity investment, that is possible. So we could either work with you directly if you're in one of the other provinces, or we've set up an Indiegogo campaign, which is basically different tiers without the equity, but with all of the same perks. And so if you're interested in supporting the project, want to be involved and part of the kind of virtual community that's forming around it, and would like some of that chocolate and gift boxes and BigCom t-shirts and so on, please check us out there. There is that link on the Equivesto profile as well. When is the offering open? So it's open now. As I mentioned earlier, that's a 90-day window, and I think we're at about, we've got 74, 75 days remaining. After which that kind of facilitated opportunity with Equivesto closes, and so we encourage you, if you are interested, to take a look and to move on that in the next next couple of months. At this point, we'll open the floor. So if anybody has questions for us, or especially while we've got Alex, if you've got any questions about the kind of the mechanics of the financial raise, the process, anything that you'd like to learn a little bit more about there, feel free to. We've got a small group, so I'd say if you can, use the hand icon to raise your hand, and we'll maybe go in that order.
I'm sure Steve would be happy to stop recording as well if you would rather ask your question not being recorded.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point, Alex. I'll find that control here, and we can have a pre-discussion in a few seconds here.